Imagine a world where the spices you use every day were worth more than gold. A world where Europe was desperate to find a direct sea route to India, the land of exotic treasures. This is the story of the man who cracked the code, a journey of courage, brutality, and discovery that would forever change the map of the world. This is the story of Vasco da Gama, born around 1460 in Sines, Portugal. Vasco da Gama wasn't just any nobleman. He grew up in a maritime family, hearing tales of the sea and the brave explorers pushing the boundaries of the known world. At the time, Portugal was a powerhouse of exploration, driven by figures like Prince Henry the Navigator. They had been painstakingly mapping the coast of Africa for decades, inching ever closer to a breakthrough. The big prize was a direct sea route to the spice-rich lands of the East. For centuries, spices like pepper, cloves, and cinnamon traveled overland through a long and complex network of traders. By the time they reached Europe, their price was astronomical. The Venetian and Genoese merchants controlled this trade, making a fortune. Portugal wanted to bypass them and go straight to the source. In 1488, another Portuguese explorer, Bartolomeu Dias, achieved a monumental feat. He rounded the southern tip of Africa, which he named the Cape of Storms. King John II of Portugal, ever the optimist, renamed it the Cape of Good Hope because it offered a new hope of reaching India. The path was open, but the journey was far from complete. The Indian Ocean was a vast, unknown entity to the Europeans. This is where Vasco da Gama enters our story. After King John II's death, his successor, King Manuel I, was determined to see this mission through. He chose Vasco da Gama, a tough, experienced, and reputedly ruthless navigator, to lead the expedition. Why him? While the exact reasons are debated, da Gama was known for his decisive and commanding nature qualities deemed essential for such a perilous and long voyage. On July 8, 1497, a fleet of 4 ships departed from Lisbon. There were 2 heavy-duty carracks, the Snow Gabriel, captained by da Gama himself, and the Snow Rafael, captained by his brother Paulo. There was also a smaller, swifter caravel called the Barrio, and a storage ship to carry supplies. The crew of about 170 men were a mix of sailors, soldiers, and even some convicts who were promised freedom if they survived the riskiest tasks. Instead of hugging the African coast like his predecessors, da Gama made a daring navigational choice. He sailed west into the open Atlantic, catching the prevailing winds that would swing him back towards the southern tip of Africa. This was a brilliant move, a massive arc through the ocean that took them out of sight of land for over 3 months, the longest such voyage by Europeans at the time. It was a huge gamble, but it paid off, saving them time and avoiding the treacherous coastal currents. After more than 4 months at sea, they finally reached the coast of modern-day South Africa. The initial encounters with the local Khoikhoi people were tense. A misunderstanding led to a skirmish, and da Gama himself was wounded by a spear. It was a stark reminder that they were in a world completely alien to them, a world that wasn't necessarily welcoming. Pressing on, the fleet rounded the Cape of Good Hope and sailed into uncharted waters, the Indian Ocean. This was the moment of truth. They began sailing up the eastern coast of Africa, a region with sophisticated and long-established trade networks, controlled by Arab merchants. The Portuguese, with their small ships and unfamiliar customs, were seen as intruders and commercial rivals. Their first major stop was Mozambique. Here, the local sultan was initially curious, but quickly became hostile when he realized the Portuguese were Christians and not fellow Muslims. They were seen as unwelcome competitors. Da Gama's crew had to flee, even firing their cannons on the city as they departed. A similar hostile reception awaited them in Mombasa, in modern-day Kenya, where they narrowly escaped a plot to seize their ships. Things were looking grim. They were thousands of miles from home, in hostile waters, with their supplies dwindling, and their crew suffering from scurvy, a horrific disease caused by a lack of vitamin C, but their luck was about to change. Further up the coast, in Malindi, they finally found a friendly ruler. The Sultan of Malindi was a rival of Mombasa's ruler and saw a potential alliance with the Portuguese. It was here that Vasco da Gama made his most crucial connection. He was introduced to a legendary Arab navigator, whose name is often cited as Ahmad ibn Majid. This expert pilot knew the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean like the back of his hand. With his guidance, the final, daunting leg of the journey across the open sea to India became possible. On April 24, 1498, with the monsoon winds at their back, da Gama's fleet set sail from Malindi. Just 23 days later, they spotted the mountains of the Western Ghats. On May 20, 1498, after almost a year of travel, Vasco da Gama's ships dropped anchor off the coast of Calicut, India. They had done it. They had opened a direct sea route from Europe to the east. But arriving was one thing, succeeding was another. Calicut was a bustling cosmopolitan hub of trade, the heart of the spice world. The local ruler, the Zamorin, was an incredibly wealthy and powerful Hindu king who presided over a trading empire dominated by Arab merchants. When da Gama finally met the Zamorin, the encounter was a cultural and economic clash of epic proportions. The Portuguese had brought relatively cheap and unimpressive gifts, some textiles, wash basins and honey, thinking they would impress a tribal African chief. The Zamorin and his court, accustomed to trading in gold, silver, and luxurious silks, were utterly unimpressed. The Arab merchants at court immediately recognized the threat the Portuguese posed to their monopoly and worked to undermine them. Negotiations were tense and difficult. The Zamorin was skeptical and demanded the Portuguese paid customs duties in gold, just like every other trader. Da Gama, proud and stubborn, refused. He managed to acquire a small cargo of spices, but the atmosphere was filled with suspicion. At one point, Da Gama and his men were even held as virtual hostages. Feeling threatened, he resorted to force, seizing several local dignitaries to ensure his own safe departure. The return journey was even more brutal than the trip out. They left India at the wrong time, sailing against the monsoon winds. The trip across the Indian Ocean that had taken 23 days on the way out now took a grueling 132 days. Scurvy ravaged the crew. So many men died that they had to abandon and burn one of their ships, the Snow Raphael, because they no longer had enough sailors to man it. Vasco's own brother Paulo died on the journey home. Of the 4 ships and 170 men that left Lisbon, only 2 ships and 55 men made it back. They finally limped into Lisbon in the summer of 1499, 2 full years after they had departed. From a human perspective, the voyage was a catastrophe, but from a commercial and strategic perspective, it was a staggering success. The small cargo of spices they brought back was sold for a profit that was reportedly 60 times the entire cost of the expedition. More importantly, they had proven that the sea route was viable. King Manuel I was overjoyed. Vasco da Gama was showered with honors and riches. He was given the title Admiral of the Seas of Arabia, Persia, India, and all the Orient. But this was just the beginning. The Portuguese now knew the way, and they intended to seize control of the spice trade by force. This led to da Gama's second voyage to India in 1502, and this is where his story takes a much darker turn. This time, he wasn't leading a small exploratory fleet. He was commanding a massive war fleet of about 20 ships. His mission was clear: to crush Arab competition and force the Indian rulers to trade exclusively with Portugal. His methods were unspeakably brutal. The most infamous incident was the capture of the Mary, a ship carrying Muslim pilgrims, including women and children, returning from Mecca. After looting the ship, da Gama ordered it to be set on fire, killing hundreds of people trapped aboard. In Calicut, he bombarded the city and committed horrific acts of cruelty to terrorize the population and its ruler. This brutality established a pattern of Portuguese dominance in the Indian Ocean for the next century. They used their superior naval firepower to create a trading empire through violence and intimidation, establishing forts and trading posts along the coasts of Africa, India, and beyond. Vasco da Gama returned to Portugal, a wealthy and feared man. He enjoyed a comfortable retirement for about 2 decades before being called upon one last time. In 1524, he was sent back to India, this time as the Viceroy, to deal with growing corruption among the Portuguese officials there. However, just a few months after arriving, he contracted malaria and died in the city of Cochin on Christmas Eve. He was initially buried there, but his remains were later returned to Portugal and interred in a magnificent tomb in Lisbon. So, how should we remember Vasco da Gama? He was undoubtedly a brilliant and courageous navigator. His first voyage is one of the greatest feats of seamanship in history, a journey that connected worlds and kick-started the age of globalism. It shifted the center of global trade from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and paved the way for centuries of European dominance. However, we cannot ignore the other side of his legacy. He was also a ruthless and brutal man whose actions brought immense suffering and violence. He was an agent of an aggressive colonial expansion that would have devastating consequences for many parts of the world. His story is a powerful reminder that history is complex. The heroes of one nation can be the villains of another. The march of progress is often paved with conflict and cruelty. Vasco da Gama wasn't just an explorer, he was a conqueror, and his journey forever altered the course of history, for better and for worse. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the past interesting, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into history, and let us know in the comments which historical figure you'd like to see us cover next. See you in the next video.